Welcome back, my friends, to the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I am Wilk from wilksworld.com, and this is going to be episode 66 of the podcast. Now, this week's guest is going to be David Lapp of the Braver Angels organization. Some of you may remember back in episode 48 when I spoke with Rick Hotchner and his wife Barbara, who are local ambassadors for the organization Braver Angels here in the state of Minnesota. Now, this week I'm joined by David, who is a co-founder of the Braver Angels organization and director of the Working People's Project, which I am also a part of. It's a great honor to have David on the show. Here at the D-Rate the Hate podcast, we are all about bettering the world one attitude at a time. Now, we did not create the hate, but with your help, we can derate the hate. It all begins with us as individuals. So what have you done today to make your life a better life? What have you done today to make the world a better place? Folks like David and Rick and Barbara and all the people over at Braver Angels, they're all about making the world a better place. Specifically, making our country a better place by depolarizing that political divide, by giving the people, like in the Working People's Project and the We the People's Forum, a voice. As I said, David Lapp leads the Working People's Project, an initiative within the Braver Angels by a multiracial group of working-class Americans of diverse backgrounds to take on polarization, build trust, and empower ordinary Americans to participate as citizen leaders in the American political life. David spent several years interviewing working-class Ohioans about their life experiences and families before helping to start the Braver Angels organization. David lives with his wife, Amber, and 5 children in South Lebanon, Ohio, the home of the first ever Braver Angels workshop in December of 2016. So let's get David in here and get to it. All right, David Lapp from Braver Angels and the Working People's Project, the We the People's Forum. Thank you for joining the D-Rate the Hate podcast, and say hello to the DTH listeners.
I'm really honored to be here and to be on your podcast, Will. Ever since I've heard about it, I've been a fan. And I'm honored to be a guest today.
Well, thank you very much. You and I met met shortly after episode 48 when I interviewed Rick and Barbara. They're local ambassadors for the Braver Angels organization. I spoke with them back in March of this year, I believe, in episode 48. And I became a member of the Braver Angels organization. And then you reached out to me shortly after that. And I've been a part of that We the People's Forum, which started out as the Working People's Project, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about in this episode, David, is how that's going. You know what it is, first of all. Yeah, I know you're heading up the Working People's Project for the Braver Angels organization, and it's certainly been a big part of both you and my life for the past 3 or 4 months. And so let's talk a little bit about that. Let's tell the DTH listeners what's going on with Braver Angels and the Working People's Project, the We the People's Forum.
Yeah, well, the Working People's Project is all about building leadership by everyday Americans for the cause of depolarization. And by everyday Americans, I'm talking particularly about working people, working class people, blue collar people who don't have a PhD next to their name. People who are working the jobs that that America couldn't live without. We couldn't live without people who are truck drivers, who are plumbers, who are electricians, et cetera, et cetera. But oftentimes we don't get to hear from those kind of people about the issues of the day in lectures and forums and so forth. If you're talking about, X, Y, or Z issue, let's say you're talking about, the challenge of addiction. You could talk to a Harvard PhD expert, somebody who studied addiction, and I'm sure you'll get some insight. But it's another thing to talk to somebody who's a recovering addict or who's living it. Or a mother who's, walking with a daughter, through addiction. And I just think that there's a lot that we as a country, we could do better. We could have better policies. We could have better understanding. We could have a more informed media if we had more people more everyday people who were driving the conversation on the issues of the day. So that's what the Working People's Project is all about, is building leadership among everyday people for the cause of political depolarization. And We the People's Forum is the signature project of the Working People's Project. We the People's Forum, it got started after, I mean, you're one of the first people I started talking to after I found out about you through De-Rate the Hate. And, there was a team of there's about 10 of us now, and there was about 5 or 6 of us at the beginning. And, we were talking about, well, what we want to do. And this idea of a forum came up, and we were running around with some ideas for the name. And, I think the one idea was the People's Forum. Another idea was the Citizens Forum, and so. And I think and then somebody said, well, the People's Forum sounds a little bit progressive. And then I think it was you who said, well, what about We the People's Forum? We the People has a long history in America, of course, and just emphasizing that it's everyday people, we the people, who government of the people, by the people, for the people. So We the People's Forum is about is a place we gather on Zoom, typically twice a month right now, to hear from everyday Americans about the issues of the day. So we've done 4 or 5 thus far. Our last one was on, does America still have an opioid crisis, where we talked to somebody who's experienced addiction and a mother who's walked with her daughter through addiction. And we had first ever conversation we had was with you and another woman, Corey Zeck, about whether the expanded unemployment benefits are fair to American workers. And of course, you having experience hiring people, and you've seen some of the effects of, the expanded unemployment benefits and how hard it has been to hire people. So you talked about that. And then there was a McDonald's worker, Corey, who she had a little bit of a different perspective. She thought that, kind of low wage workers were kind of standing up for themselves by not going back to these jobs. So we had a spirited, friendly, civil conversation. And that's what it's all about. It's bringing people who might not necessarily be politically on the same page, but who've got common experiences, and they have experiences about the issue. They're experts on the issue because of their experiences, and hearing from those people. We're going to have some more forums on immigration. Would love to have something, where we talk with police officers and Black community leaders. Let's have the tough conversations with people on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a great part of, obviously what I do here on the De-Rate the Hate podcast, and the reason that we were introduced in the first place for that episode 48 was because we're all about bettering the world. And one of the reasons that I started the De-Rate the Hate podcast was the same reason and the same spirit of what Braver Angels does. And that's the De-Rate the Hate podcast was meant to turn down that hate, turn down the rhetoric, turn down the divisiveness, turn down the division that we see between people of differing mindsets. And that's one of the things, obviously, that attracted me to the Braver Angels organization. And then when you reached out to me and we began talking back early spring about the Working People's Project, one of the things that I really liked, you and my first conversation was giving the average working American a place at the podium when a lot of times they don't get that opportunity. That's one of the things that I really like about podcasts, the ability for, me to start a podcast and reach out to people. And, we've been heard not only all around the country, but all around the world with this podcast, and getting to reach out and get our message out to everyday Americans all over the place and everyday people around the world. Because let's face it, the rhetoric that is out there now is not just specific to the United States. I mean, that's where most of my focus is. That's where most of your focus is. I absolutely love my country. I absolutely love what this country was built upon, and the spirit of this country, and the fact that this country was built upon an idea that we could bring several people of several different nationalities, several different origins.
E pluribus unum. Out of many one.
Of many one. The idea that we could bring so many people together And it wasn't just going to be an aristocracy like they had in Europe. And all this nonsense that we hear nowadays about this country built on white supremacy and stuff. I don't like that. I don't think that's the true message that everyday America needs to hear. I don't believe that's the real message that everyday America relates to and can attach themselves to, because most everyday Americans don't see that. They don't see it. They don't believe it. They don't feel it. But the loudest voices out there, the mainstream media, the politicians, the people that strive and have a vested interest in keeping us divided, that's where that message is coming from. It's not everyday Americans. So when everyday Americans, everyday blue collar Americans, the plumbers, the HVAC guy, the truck driver, the restaurant worker, when they get their chance at a podium, when they get the voice how they feel, it makes them feel part of the conversation again. And I think that's what's so important about this movement that you and I are a part of. You know, whether it be me with the D-Rate the Hate podcast, you with Braver Angels, or us in that collaboration as you know, the We the People's Forum. I'm loving it so much. So talk a little bit about your background with Braver Angels, David. I know you're a co-founder of Braver Angels, and the first workshop for Braver Angels several years ago was in South Lebanon, Ohio, where you're from. Talk about your role in co-founding Braver Angels and how that led to where we are today with Braver Angels and the Working People's Project.
Absolutely. And I just think you really hit the nail on the head there too. And let me just say, when you were talking about how America was founded, not as an aristocracy, but as e pluribus una, and bringing this country was not founded on the idea that, there'd be a professional class who gets into politics, who gets into government, and we rely on that professional class to run the country for us. That's not the American idea. The American idea is that it's regular people like you and me who, are active in voting for our leaders, and we can become members of Congress and ourselves as well. And so this idea that has become ascendant in America today, which is that you have to have, college degree in politics, or you have to be a lawyer, you have to be a millionaire in order to run for Congress. Think of how many, I haven't looked it up, but I bet if you look it up, I bet more than half of our U.S. senators are millionaires. And that's a problem. That's a problem where if we're depending on, you have to be a millionaire basically to be a U.S. senator. So anyway, so I completely agree with you. That's not the American idea. And that's what we're working to. That's why we're doing We the People's Forum and the Working People's Project. But yes, so the Braver Angels, it was founded in late 2016. We knew that we wanted to address political polarization, but we didn't know what direction we would want to go with that. We didn't know if we wanted to be more like a think tank that's doing more research, or if we wanted to be more of a grassroots organization, doing, on the ground work like workshops. And then it was right after the 2016 election. And of course, we all remember that, the surprise that many people had at Trump's election. And of course, people who voted for Trump were elated. People who did not vote for Trump were really upset and took to the streets, and, not my president and all that stuff surfaced. And as did the narrative that if you voted for Trump, then, you should divorce, anybody who voted for Trump, cut them off from our lives. That became kind of a narrative. I became troubled by that. And I live in a very working class town where, probably 3/4 of people voted for Trump. And so, most of the people in South Lebanon were happy about Trump's election. But I also know that, like my friend, I think he's helping us with the Working People's Project, Lance. We were talking, and Lance said, I really hope that Trump can help to heal and bring our country together. And I was just thinking, if we don't know each other, how can we how can we build our country? How can we form a more perfect union if we don't know each other? You're just depending on stereotypes of each other if we don't know each other. And so I was motivated to, so David Blankenhorn, who's the president of Braver Angels, we were talking and, said, well, what if we bring together 10 people who voted for Donald Trump and 10 people who voted for Hillary Clinton? And let's spend the weekend together and to see if we could talk with each other rather than at each other. And so I organized it. I invited people to participate. Lance, who's working with us on the Working People's Project, he was one of the participants in that. We had 10 people who voted for Trump, 11 people who voted for Clinton, and we spent the weekend together. And we called, last minute, we called Bill Doherty, who's one of the co-founders of Braver Angels now. He said, Bill, we've got the people, but we don't know what we're going to do. So we need to figure out what the heck we're going to do with each other, for a weekend. So Bill developed what's basically now the first, what we now know is the Braver Angels Red Blue Workshop, a series of exercises designed to bring Reds and Blues together and not to change our minds about each other, but to better understand each other, to begin the process of building relationships and to look for common ground.
Yep.
So that's what we did that first weekend, December 9th through the 11th, 2016, only 3 weeks after the 2016 election. And it was a powerful weekend. I mean, we cried, we hugged, we came into it. It was, very diverse group of people. I mean, we're talking about, the Middle Eastern immigrant sitting next to the white factory worker, and it was a diverse group of people. And it was just, by the end of the weekend, it was just this powerful feeling of, if this could happen in a lot more neighborhoods across the country, we could be better off. We don't have to be a prisoner of this polarization.
Right.
And then, of all people, NPR in Minnesota, they had an hour-long segment at that time on polarization. Mm-hmm. And the host found out about our little workshop through Bill Doherty and invited one of the Reds and one of the Blues to come on our show to talk about what happened. And so they did, and people just started writing in and saying, how could I do this in my community? And so we just started responding to, people saying, how could I do this in my community? And then we decided to do a bus tour. In the summer of 2017, we just said, let's rent a bus. Let's be like a rock band or a minor league baseball team, go from town to town and do workshops, So we stayed in people's houses. We started in Cincinnati, Ohio. We went all the way up to St. Albans, Vermont, and ended in Virginia, trying out the workshops. And that was kind of so it was, became very grassroots very quickly, working with people on the ground. So people on the ground that we train, moderate the workshops, organize the workshops, and, to where we are today, where, we got members in all 50 states, over 75 alliances, et cetera, et cetera.
No, it's been incredible. And just the journey that I've taken along with Braver Angels and the, the We the People's Project. And like oftentimes what happens with politics and things like you and I were talking about in the beginning, how it gets to be a point where the people that are most interested or most affluent, they end up being the ones that really dominate the stage again. And
yeah, absolutely.
And we saw that happening with Braver Angels, or you did, and that's why you really got that We the People's Project or We the People's Forum under the Working People's Project going.
Yeah, if I could say something about that, that's exactly right, Will. Because those first couple of workshops, that we organized here in South Lebanon, Ohio, we had a diverse group of people, in terms of, you had people who were, you had the factory worker sitting next to the lawyer kind of thing, and that's what you want, that's American. But yes, I mean, as with, a lot of things in American public life and political life today, if you just let the waters, go, the people with the most time on their hands, the people who have, the greatest ability to, the most free time to participate in those things, are going to. But then also, I think there's also a part of a culture that's developed where, we kind of expect people to to talk a certain way, and there's these kind of unwritten codes,
Right.
where if you kind of deviate from that a little bit, well, then what are you doing here,
Right.
And
Right. I think, if I might interject there, I think, and this is something that I was going to bring up, in one of our discussions about this particular part of it. I think people just become conditioned, kind of like you were saying, that the haves get used to speaking, so they speak, and the have-nots get used to standing back and being quiet, and so they don't. And I think that's what really started to change during the Trump administration, because the Trump administration really started to give those have-nots a voice that they weren't used to having, and they really started to get in their groove and speak up, and a lot of people that wouldn't normally speak started to speak, and that included the working class American, the factory worker who was disenfranchised when his company had been, when his factory was shut down and moved to Mexico or moved to China. So those folks started to feel a power again when they felt like somebody was speaking for them. So they started to speak up a lot more, and which really, let's face it, really got a lot of people pissed off. It did, David, and we've seen it, and there's a lot of people out there now that are getting to speak that didn't speak before. And that's why I think this forum, this We the People's Forum, and I love that name, and thank you for bringing up the fact that I brought it up, but I don't look for any credit for it, because it was the founders that came up with the We the People's Forum, because the United States of America was the original We the People's Forum. It was the original colonists who said, we the people are going to stand up to dictators and an all-powerful government that's going to tell us what to do. And I think that's so important that we get more people, and that's why I love this organization. I love being a part of what we're doing together, because getting everyday Americans to realize, you know what, I don't just have to sit back and be quiet. I can use my voice. There are forums out there. There are like-minded people like me. And it doesn't just have to be like-minded people like me. I can have a civil conversation with people who are opposing views without being told that I have to hate you and you have to hate me. And we can't spend any time together because we don't think alike, or because some far-off politician has told us that we have to hate each other. And that's why I love what we're doing here, David.
Yeah. And I think also too, when you talk to, regular everyday people, there's also, we have, our strong views on issues, but I just also, and actually surveys bear this out, that surveys show that the more degrees you have, the more politically polarized you are. So in other words, the people with PhDs, no matter whether they're Republican or Democrat, those are the people where political polarization is the most intense. People with high school educations, for instance, they're less politically polarized than those people with PhDs. Now, my own thinking on that is that I think it's because, a lot of working class, blue collar people, you're living off of a lot of experiences, and the workplaces are often pretty diverse. You're working with people who look different, African American, Hispanic, white. I just think that there's a little bit more on the, just like, okay, well, what's happening, on the ground, and what's happening, what's the reality here. I just think there's a little bit more attunement to that for working class people. And I like the way that Annette, who's on our We the People's Forum team, she's from Maryland. She put it. She said that hearing from ground level and ordinary people, she thought would showcase our divide from a different perspective. Because she said that street people are often united in their poverty or their addictions, and then they based on those experiences, they have something to say about that.
Right.
Perspectives that we often don't get to hear.
Right.
So yeah, and I just think that it's so I think that the more we can hear from working class people, I think it will I think it'll make the public conversation better, because you're broadening the experience, the pool of experiences that you're drawing from when making decisions, on policies and so forth.
I think you're absolutely right. There's no more. I guess the best way that I can say this is, how out of touch do you have to be to sit there on television and talk about rural people not having the ability to photocopy an ID? We saw that this week from the gal that's our current vice president. What we see from the politicians and what we see from, I don't think this country is really as divided by color as a lot of these politicians and the people in the media try to say. And I don't believe we're divided so much by immigrants, natural born Americans as the news and the mainstream media and the politicians would have everybody believe. And that, I mean, they breathlessly look to divide us by color. And I talked about it in a previous episode. They want to put us in a box. They want to put a label on that box, and they want to make sure those boxes are divided. They want to keep us pushed apart. It's really not that. It's how out of touch are those people that have the podium? How out of touch are those people that are sitting up there in the golden castle, and they want to tell everybody else how to live their lives, but they really have no idea what my life is like. They have no idea what your life is like. They have no idea what Annette's life is like, or Lance's life is like, or if Corey's life is like. They don't know that. The deepest they get into that life of their constituents is as far as they need to get into it to pander to them. And it's not that they really listen to us. They look for pieces that they can put together for a pander package to put you in a box and put a label on it. And I think that's very unfortunate. And that's why I love what we're doing with the organization, giving people a place to speak their message.
Yeah. And I mean, every election year, every 4 years, Ohio, you have journalists crisscrossing Ohio, going down to the diners or whatever, trying to understand how everyday Ohioans, for instance, are thinking about the issues of the day. But we shouldn't depend on, that's not a very good model to depend upon hearing from working class Ohioans, working class Americans, that you're depending on out-of-state journalists who, tend to congregate in the East Coast or the West Coast. You're depending on them to come through every 4 years, when they're drive-through, talk to a couple people, write a story about it in the New York Times, and then that's going to be our understanding of what working class Americans are thinking about the issues of the day. We need people like you, Will, running for Congress. We need people like you. We need electricians and truck drivers to be sitting in the halls of power, making policies and drawing attention to the issues. Because if you have, I don't know what percent of members of Congress are lawyers. I'm guessing maybe 75% or more. If you have, as your elected representatives, 75% or more lawyers they have certain life experiences, right? Then they're going to be thinking about the worlds that they know when thinking about public policy and, challenges in America. So I was just talking to a guy who was incarcerated from 2018 to 2020. He's thinking about, how can we make the prison system so that you're actually addressing trauma that a lot of people like him brought into prison. And I want that guy elected to Congress. If he's in Congress, if he's in the state house, he's going to do something interesting with addressing the laws and how we are, in our prison system and our criminal law and all that stuff.
Brings an entirely different perspective.
An entirely different perspective. And so we've got to just reshape the way that we're doing our political life so that it's not just journalists doing a drive-through every 4 years and okay, now we know what, or, I love Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance, great book. But, that was written 4 years ago, and J.D. Vance can't speak for everybody, so we've got to have we've got to have a whole restructuring and reshaping of our public life. We just got to, we just got to have a lot more people, everyday Americans actually running for Congress, hearing from them in the news media, hearing from them in places like Braver Angels and We the People's Forum.
Mm-hmm. No, there's no doubt about it. It's, I've talked a lot about it on this podcast about the people with the loudest voices being the most divisive people that we have out there, and that's literally why I started this podcast, is because I'm literally have gotten to the point in my life where I'm so sick of seeing people so divided, and the hate that is brought by, now, in my opinion, it comes largely from one side, but I do understand that it's not a one-sided issue. And I think if more neighbors talk to more neighbors, and people just focused more on themselves as individuals and being kind to one another, that we could get a lot further than where we are. And yes, I do agree that people need to strive more to get into a position. Now, the politics isn't for everybody, and certainly not for me. I always make the joke, I don't have a skeleton in my closet. I got a garage full of bones. It's a joke, but I've gone beyond that point in my life where I have got no interest in getting into politics because I don't like swimming in swamps. But I will report on the swamp from the outside, and I will try to better the world. I think I can influence more people as a person who has this podcast and actually talking to people, and instead of trying to put them in a box, trying to get rid of all the boxes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think,
by the way, we should say too that sometimes when people hear, you want to have working class people, immediately people think about white working class people who support Trump. Working class America is very politically diverse. That's another thing, right? You're talking about African Americans, you're talking about Hispanics, you're talking about immigrants, you're talking about a very politically diverse, racially diverse group of Americans. And it's all of those people who, again, it's one of those boxes. Sometimes when people think working class American, you're thinking, oh, white working class Trump supporter. Not necessarily.
No, I think that's an important point to make, and you're right. I mean, that's a paradigm that we have to get past, because not you and I, because you and I are very familiar with that. We understand that. When I look to find a good person, I'm not looking at them because I don't look at them because they're black, white, yellow, whatever. It makes no difference to me what color a person is, what rainbow they're a fan of, where they work, what profession they are. Good people are good people. And we have to get back to the mindset, David, that good people come from everywhere on this planet. Good people come in every color that God made us. Good people are in every profession there is. There are good people that do everything and come in every color, every size, every, what doesn't matter what sex you are, what color you are, what profession you're part of, what country you come from. Good people are good people. And it really comes down to values and who we are as a person. So this podcast is really about finding people that want to be a good person, want to show kindness to their fellow man, want to honor their country, honor the people that made this country great, make this country great again. And I don't care who you are. If you think that making this country great again is a hate-filled statement, you probably need help. That's my opinion. But, things like that, we need to get past all the rhetoric that the loudest voices constantly use to keep us divided. We do, David. And that's what you at Braver Angels and the Working People's Project and me at the D-Rate the Hate podcast, that's what we're all about. And that's
Right.
what I really wanted to highlight in this episode with you. And I appreciate you joining me so much. And I appreciate the work that we're going to do together in the future. Is there anything, any call to action, anything you've got coming up that you want to talk about? Put it out there to the DTH listeners and let's make something great happen. Let's help people become part of this movement.
Yeah, well, so first thing is join Braver Angels, join as a member of braverangels.org. And then, check out We the People's Forum. When this podcast is being recorded, our next one is Monday, July 26th. It's going to be talking with that gentleman whom I mentioned is formerly incarcerated and a recovering addict about their perspective on trauma and recovery in America. And but then we're going to be having forums on immigration, term limits, police issues, lots of stuff like that. And if you have, this is what I would say, if you have ideas or issues, or people that we should be talking, everyday people that we should be talking to, or issues that you would like to see highlighted at We the People's Forum, let us know. I'll just give you my email address, dlapp@braverangels.org, dlapp@braverangels.org. Email me, talk to Wilk, and join the team over here at We the People's Forum. Help us to build this and to take this to more people. And one of the things that we're going to be doing too is coming out of these forums, like we just did a forum on addiction. Well, now we're going to have what we call a Braver Angels Common Ground workshop on addressing addiction. So bringing people together who have different perspectives on how to address addiction, but we're going to say, okay, what's the common ground elements we can find? And then from that, we're going to go to a Braver Angels town hall on addressing addiction. And we're going to have the common ground elements that we had. And then we're going to talk to some political leaders, some representatives or politicians to say, hey, here's the points of common ground we found on this issue, and have a dialogue with them about that. So the same thing could happen on, immigration, strengthening vocational education in America, you name it. A whole host of issues. The model is bring together people who have experience that have been affected by the issue, find the points of common ground, and then let's go tell, our political leaders about the common ground we're finding.
Such an important cause. dlapp@braverangels.org, or reach out to me, wilk@wilksworld.com. We'll get you guys involved in the movement, because it's such an important thing for the American people to start getting along again. Here at the D-Rate the Hate podcast, all about bettering the world one attitude at a time. It starts with all of us as individuals getting involved and getting back to a civil society and doing great things like David is doing with the Working People's Project from Braver Angels and the We the People's Forum. So, David, I cannot thank you enough for the time that you spent with me today for this interview, and I look so much forward to all the things that we've got coming up, and continuing to work with you and all the people in the We the People's Forum.
It's a joy and honor to work with you, Will.
Friends, I'm so grateful for having had the opportunity to have another great conversation with a great guest doing great things to better the world, and more specifically, better our country through depolarizing the political divide with the Braver Angels organization, the Working People's Project, the We the People's Forum. I got to tell you, such an important cause, such an important organization, and I'm so proud to not only call David a friend, but be a part of that organization and try to do my part to give some input into how we can continue to depolarize our country when there's so many people out there that are doing everything they can to keep us divided. So reach out to me, reach out to David, try to become part of this, become part of that movement. It's so important. But more importantly, when you're out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember, it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. I am Wilk from wilksworld.com. Email me, check us out wherever you get your audio, follow us, leave us some feedback. I'm going to back on out of here. We'll catch you next time.